Everybody, welcome to an earlier edition of the Game Addicted Show. Doing a Sunday night stream. Never really do those anymore. Jumping back into the college football rankings. If you're watching this on the YouTube, make sure to head over to my Twitch channel right up there in the top right corner. You could see me do live streams discussing any team you'd like. I could prove to you why your team's the best. I could prove why they're the worst. Always welcome live discussions discussing any aspect of the college football rankings. And if you're watching this on Twitch, you want to see some old footage, I archive all my footage over to the YouTube channel. You could see any of my analysis leading up to the college football finals. And you could call me out my sheesh if you'd like. Or you could just agree with everything I say. Whatever you'd like. It's all up to you. But we're in kind of interesting position this week because obviously the rankings come on Tuesdays, and I thought instead of reacting to the rankings and kind of going back and forth on what I think they are, I think this time we'll do more of a predictive, like where we think the rankings will go. There were some big disagreements from the last week rankings, and it was pretty wild to say the least as far as what happened this past weekend with, I believe, up to 7 top 25 teams that were knocked off. I expect some big changes to happen this week. So we'll see how that plays out. But without further ado, let's jump into our college football rankings for this week. So first up, we have Pittsburgh in our top 25 again. They were in the playoff committee. They'll probably move up because of their win over Duke. Duke, not a very good team. They're 3-6, but a lot to like about Pittsburgh. I know they have a great quarterback. His name escapes me at the moment, but their offense is ranked number 2 in the nation, so that should say a lot. They have a weak strength of schedule, of course, playing the ACC. That's kind of something that's going to hurt any ACC team. The only other ranked team from there is the NC State and Wake Forest. Great resume, I think, from Pittsburgh as far as their own personal stats. Terrible in the strength schedule, really bad strength production. Look at this, their victory per game. It's less than 4 points, so they're racking up a lot of weak wins to get into the top 25. And one thing I don't like what the playoff committee did was basically eliminate all the small schools. Specifically, I'm thinking like UTSA, who I think is not only should be ranked, but is very underrated, and gave those spots up to not only that, like Appalachian State, another team will jump into Coastal Carolina. I think the only small schools that are on the top 25, and I don't know if they'll continue to be there, is like Fresno State, who just lost, and San Diego State. I think are the only 2 small schools. Oh, and BYU are the only small schools that are in the playoff committee pool. So we'll dive into that part. But anyways, not to ramble on too much. Safe to say that Pittsburgh is a top 25 team. They'll probably be a little bit higher in the playoff committee poll. I'm saying they barely deserve to be there. Yeah. Moving on. NC State. NC State's kind of an interesting case because they've been ranked for a while, and I haven't had them ranked really. They finally snuck into our top 25 here. But with their win over Florida State this past week, they finally snuck in. Again, it's the ACC. ACC is a pretty weak conference this year. Not as bad as the Pac-12, unfortunately, but pretty weak to say the least. Again, strength schedule 107, strength production 7. It is okay, 74. Their quality of wins, as you could tell, is a little bit better than Pittsburgh, which is why they're ranked higher, both here and in the playoff committee polls. So, expect them to move up. I think they're they'll probably be closer to number 15 with all the losses that took place this week. But I really think they should, again, barely be ranked. So, feel free to disagree there, but that's where I think that's going to go. Moving on to Baylor. You know what? I think Baylor is really good. Big 12 is, third best conference right now. Solid all around. Look at their strength schedule and strength production, identical, 76 and 76. So they're really, middle of the road when it comes to that. I am not surprised by the TCU loss. TCU's kind of those, even though they're struggling, they're one of those teams that could show up and beat anybody anytime. I mean, just actually just kind of looking at TCU. Let's look at some of their accomplishments this season. They lose, to like SMU and Texas, which is expected. Then they surprise you with a win over like Texas Tech and then now Baylor. A lot of games they probably should have won. Probably should have a better record. But I think what the big telltale sign about TCU is their offense is ranked number 27. With playing against strength of schedule as tough as they are, 31 and 36 in strength production. So, this resume tells me that this team could strike at any time. So it's not a team you want to take lightly. I don't think their schedule reflects as good as they could be because, we've shown two teams already from just the ACC alone who have really weak strength of schedules but are able to win because they're weak strength of schedules. And you'll find that's a common theme with a lot of these teams. But, yeah, Baylor, anyways, back to Baylor. Yeah, that's a game that could sneak up on you. I think that, it's TCU could really strike at any time, and they did. Coastal Carolina, a team that it surprised me in a lot of ways. It surprises me that they've been ranked as high as they've been when it comes to the AP polls and what I've been ranking them here in my VPI rankings. It's been pretty similar. But it also surprised me that the playoff committee knocked them off altogether. I understand why they did. I mean, look at this. Strength of schedule and strength production is the worst in college football, right? Their victory production index per game is the lowest of any top 25 team, right? It's barely 3.25. And their losses, the only losses against a really reputable school with Appalachian State, which we'll jump into. But, they have number 7 offense and number 18 defense. But you got to see a correlation here. If you're playing the worst teams in college football when it comes to their total offense and defense, are your stats being boosted because of that? And, I mean, it looks like that's the case here. But, again, you have to ask yourself, even though the quality of their wins is super low, they're I think the lowest ranked 8-1 team. Do they deserve to be in the top 25? And if you respect them all season in the AP polls, if I'm telling you here, I think the playoff committee kind of missed out by not having the top 25. I think that them making room for some of the schools we'll jump into, I think is ultimately what hurt them here. But Coastal Carolina, I think absolutely should be a top 25 school, regardless of how weak their strength schedule is. Another team from the Sun Belt Conference with Appalachian State. Appalachian State likes to make appearances from time to time in the rankings. If you could see Appalachian State, their strength schedule, strength production, pretty middle of the road. Actually tougher than what like we saw with NC State. And Pittsburgh, surprisingly, even though they play in the Sun Belt, a big part of that is look at some of the teams they've played on the schedule. They have Louisiana, tough team, who we have in the top 25 here. We have Coastal Carolina, we just covered, still tough team, even though they played a weak strength schedule. Marshall, not a bad team at all. Miami, who's putting a good run together, even though they lost that game. But even East Carolina's not too shabby. Not good, middle of the road. But Appalachian State, with the win over Arkansas State, which is again a weak school, it's possible they sneak into the top 25 in the college football rankings this week. Highly unlikely though, just because, it doesn't look like the committee respects small schools at all. They're just leaving them out altogether, with exception, like I said, just 3 schools. So we'll see what happens there. But Appalachian State, always bringing it every year. I don't think there's been 1 year since they've been in Division One that they haven't had a winning record. So this season is no different. But yeah, Appalachian State should be ranked. Wisconsin. Did I not tell you guys? I've been telling you guys all season that Wisconsin is way better than the record showed, right? They started the season 1-3, and people wrote them off. But the thing I kept pointing out was that look at their strength of schedule, number 2 in the nation. Strength of production, number 20, right? An absolutely brutal schedule, but their defense was stellar. And again, guys, defense wins championships. I'm like, just let them get into a little bit easier games. They'll start getting to rhythm. And that's what's going on now. 5 straight wins over some pretty good schools. I mean, you have Iowa in there. You have Purdue. Yeah, I think there's a 4-way tie right now in the Big Ten Conference. I don't know what that's the East or West Division they play in. But, Army, good school. Illinois, not so much. But, they've been putting together, racking up some really good wins, and they are rallying. I mean, Wisconsin is a dangerous team, and I think they're written off way too early because, again, that if you look at the first 3 to 4 games, I mean, even Eastern Michigan was a tough matchup. I mean, they're no gimme for a small school, but I mean, Notre Dame, who's 8-1, Michigan, who's 8-1, Penn State, who was top 10 for a while, still 6-3, Penn State still having a great season. So yeah, I think a lot of people were kind of sleeping on Wisconsin. They kind of rode them off with that 1-3 start, but not too fast, my friends, as Fred Lee Corso likes to say. So Wisconsin, very deserving of a top 25 ranking. Ranked number 20. I know in the playoff committee they had him number 21. They'll move up, but I think that 20 is, I think if they would move up one spot, that would be fair. But, knowing the playoff committee, they're probably going to move up a lot higher. Again, even though if you had them 21 and they beat a really weak opponent like Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers isn't the weakest opponent. They're 4-5. But, they'll probably move like 3 or 4 spots with all that. It was a crazy weekend. It's only natural. Another team that is just being overlooked, another team from the Sun Belt Conference, is with Louisiana. Now, I got it just like when we're looking at Coastal Carolina. Louisiana's schedule is just as bad. I mean, look at the strength of schedules, 129. So the second worst, and then the strength of production is third worst, right? They're playing the worst offenses and defenses. That's interesting, though, is even though they have that schedule, their total offense and defense is kind of middle of the road when comparing them to Coastal Carolina. Because Coastal Carolina, well, let's look at a few teams, right? Coastal Carolina, number 7 offense, number 18 defense, right? Top notch. Appalachian State, 1751, respectively. And then you get to Louisiana, who has the best record out of these schools. Yeah, 7-2 versus Coastal Carolina, who's 8-1. Louisiana, yeah, there's VPI per game is really, really low. But those wins matter, and the more you win, the more they add up. I mean, the thing you always have to consider when you're looking at these schools, I like to repeat this every week, is that it's a very fragile ladder they're on. I mean, wins have value, and the value of these wins are really low, but they do have value, and you have to ask yourself, how many wins from a Louisiana or Coastal Carolina is equivalent to a win of like Texas or Alabama, right? Or is it like half as much? Is it 2/3 of the value? That's what we're trying to measure here. So even though they have their quality of their wins is a lot lower, you win enough games, it's like a slow climb. But then the flip side of that, because you play such weak strength of schedule, if it's so fragile, if you lose one of these games, you fall off the map. And we've seen it time and time again with some of these schools. I mean, just look at Fresno State, for example. We'll pull up Fresno. They're not ranked this week on here, and they'll be out of the college football playoffs. Fresno State plays in the Mountain West. Fresno State was top 25 team last week. Look at this. They got punished hard against this Boise State loss. And because of that, I mean, they dropped, it's another almost 5 points, and that just diminished them. And I think that'll be it for Fresno State in the top 25. I don't see anybody left on the schedule for them to be able to climb out with 2 games left, leading into. I don't even know if they're gonna. I think they'll. I don't know how their division works, but I'm sure they'll make it to the conference championship game, and maybe they could sneak in number 25 then. But that's best case scenario for Fresno State. But moving on to another small school team. BYU, they actually dropped in our rankings, and that's because they played, an FCS school this late in the season. And again, I treat FCS schools. Look at this. I put them 0-12. They are treated as winless schools. They are treated as if they played in the worst called like if it's a fake conference of like the worst record schools. For when we're looking at their opponents' record and their production. So that's the data I put in as a preset for Division II schools. And yeah, you get punished for playing them. There's no gimmies here. And if you lose against them, oh boy, do you get punished. So luckily, BYU took care of business. Still, so much opportunity. They had everything going for them. I mean, their strength schedule was solid, 61. Strength production, solid, 61. It's funny, there's been a few schools already we've seen, one or two already, right, where their strength schedule, strength production matching, and, it makes sense. But, yeah, had they beat Boise State, who, is starting to ride high here, and then they beat Baylor, I mean, we'd be talking about a team that had everything on their resume ready to join the college football playoff conversation. But still, Cougs are looking to have a great season. Don't knock them out yet. And they're riding high here. They are number 15. They'll probably move up. I think they should move down because of that playing such a weak opponent late in the season. But they still have a big game against USC and one other school. I'll have to look that up later. But yeah. Here at the Game Ticket Show, we respect the small schools. We don't dismiss them because they're small schools. We don't dismiss them because they're weak strength of schedule. And you'll notice that we have quite a few that aren't even being looked at by the playoff committee. Another small school. Like, look, how many small schools do we have so far, right? We've had 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our 5th small school, and there's still more to come. And yet the playoff committee only has 3. We have 5 so far. So, yeah, it tells you a lot. Houston, we have a problem. No. 8-1. Again, really weak strength schedule. Really weak strength production. Interesting stats. Really good defense. Which surprised me. I think I mentioned that before. That for a team that traditionally has been known for their offense, like Kevin Sumlin and I don't know who else they've had over there, but now for their defense. But that Texas Tech game was a missed opportunity for Houston, but they've racked off 8 straight wins, granted against small, weak opponents. Their biggest win coming off of SMU, and I think that's what really catapulted them to be a top 25 team. VPI, barely over 4, but yeah. Houston, not much more to say about the Cougs, but definitely they shouldn't be on there. Let's go into the coveted SEC. So let's point something out here. I mentioned earlier how each win has value, right? And we're saying, let's say comparing to the worst team here with Coastal Carolina, we're saying the value of each win is a little over 3 points, right? 3.25 points. And we're saying that Ole Miss has a value of almost 5 points. So we're essentially saying that almost a little over 3/5 of Coastal Carolina's wins is equivalent to Ole Miss wins. But Ole Miss has one less win and one additional loss. So looking at it that way, Ole Miss doesn't have to try as hard to be ranked ahead of these smaller schools because they play a tougher schedule. Look at this, strength of schedule 56, way higher than those schools we mentioned previously. Their production really high, number 12. What that tells us is that the teams they're playing have high level of offenses and defenses. So look at their loss production index per game, right? It's really low, 3. All these other schools we're looking at, Coastal Carolina was, on the high 3s. Same thing with Appalachian State. Appalachian State 4.5. That's really bad. What we're saying, we're looking at that number. We're saying that these are tough losses, and they're not being punished hard for them because, again, they lost against only Alabama and Auburn, who, even though I say shouldn't be a top 25 team, is 6-3 and is putting together a nice season. So that's what we're saying. We're not punishing Ole Miss as hard as we're punishing these small schools and rewarding them more for their wins. So fair is fair, and that's the approach we're taking when we're looking at the VPI formula. But Ole Miss, even though they played a smaller school, still Liberty is no gimme, and for them to win that game should be rewarded. And usually I knock the SEC for doing that, but kudos to Ole Miss for, even though they play, I hate that the SEC only plays 8 games when you have the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the Big 12 all playing 9 game on conference games, and which ties into less or more losses being distributed amongst their conference compared to the ACC and the SEC that pulled the 8-game crap, and that's how they improved their conference record doing that. Anyways, that's a whole. We've gotten to that rabbit hole so many times. We'll just leave that alone for today. But yeah, Ole Miss, number 16 here. They were the same rank in the college football polls last week. They'll probably be higher. But again, you'll notice a trend here. The SEC's generally pretty overrated, especially like Mississippi State. I'm glad they lost because they had no business being a top 25 school. That's ridiculous. Like, not even close. Moving on to Iowa. Now, here's a team that was really underrated and had a okay win against Northwestern. Northwestern, not a really good school, but win still counts. Puts them at number 15. Again, I think I mentioned this last week. It surprises me that you would have Iowa, as if it was a top 3 team, drop so far. It shows the bias that even exists, between the SEC and the Big Ten. The Big Ten is a really good conference. It's just surprised me because I was in the big name school that some of these other schools are. For I'd say Iowa and Ole Miss are probably. I don't know. I don't want to defend anybody. No, screw you. I don't even like Ole Miss. Fall in the same level as far as name recognition, but yeah, really surprised me why Iowa's so underrated all of a sudden. When they're so well respected. I know they had some tough losses against Purdue and Wisconsin, but as you're seeing, those two are really good schools. It does not make sense to me. Purdue is on the cusp of being a top 25 team. I'll show it to you. Purdue, I actually have at number 27 ranked, and they just beat Michigan State, which was a huge boost for them. Really, really surprises me that Iowa is being punished so hard. They're really underrated. Hopefully, they move up quite a bit with this win. Moving on to our 6th small school. Again, we respect the smaller conference schools here. San Diego State. I would even count the American Athletic Conference as small schools. I wasn't counting those earlier, but we'll jump into that later. So maybe my math is wrong here. But anyway, San Diego State, one of the few schools barely ranked in the AP polls, but they are 8-1. I understand. Strength schedule, 116. Strength production, 81. Went on, beat Hawaii. Only loss is to Fresno State, which is a really good school. Solid victory per game. Solid loss per game, not too bad. Great defenses. Look at this. Similar makeup between these two schools. Number 10 in defense and 123 in total offense. Number 150. Better offense and slightly better defense than Iowa. Obviously, the key thing is here they're doing against this week's strength schedule, where Iowa is doing that against a top 25 strength schedule and a top 33 strength production. So big difference in the resume. Ultimately, the reason these teams are neck and neck is the one additional win that San Diego State has. That's why they're barely over Iowa, but it's close. And I think as the season continues, you'll see Iowa, even when they have one more loss, they'll leapfrog San Diego State the way they're going. But for now, San Diego State, number 14, should be a lot higher. Really underrated in the college football playoff polls. Texas A&M. This is an interesting team to cover for this week because they did beat Auburn. And if you look at it from, the playoff committee, you're looking, oh, wow, they beat Auburn top, Sorry about that. Got thirsty in the conversation. So they're like, oh, wow, they beat Auburn. Auburn's number 13, and, we're number 14, and we should. No. Auburn was really overrated. Auburn should barely be a top 25 team. Not to say that wasn't a good win. Really good win. I'm not knocking it. I mean, should definitely give you a boost. Texas A&M ranked number 13. They'll probably move to a top 10 in the playoff committee poll. I'm not going to debate that too much because when you have a team that beat Alabama, has a solid resume all around, like I said, really tough strength schedule, really tough strength production. I'm not going to argue too much, even though I don't like the SEC. But yeah, great win by Texas A&M, and again, I think that I don't want to say the committee polls is in on it with like ESPN or something, but I have a conspiracy theory that they purposely boost up teams before a game to rank them higher to promote that game. It looks more. You could sell more a number 13 Auburn playing number 4 Texas A&M than you could sell playing number 17 or 18 Texas A&M versus number 25 Auburn, whatever had a rank last week. So I think it's the sell, and then also the result is you boost these teams up higher. I mean, you have a contract with them. That's my conspiracy theory, guys. I think that's what they do. I know the committee, playoff committee and the peoples and all that's supposed to be completely, separate entity, but yeah, that's my conspiracy theory on this. But regardless, Texas A&M number 13, they deserve it. Oh, Oregon, I love to talk to you about. I love to talk about them every week. Okay, we need to address this. Oregon will probably move up to number 3 in the playoff committee poll just by default, just because Michigan State lost. Maybe they get leapfrogged by Ohio State. Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Oregon. I mean, I'll stand by that. So that's possible. Let's go back to Oregon here. Oregon only moved up one spot. They were ranked number 13 last week, number 12. Again, because they beat a really weak Washington team. I had to read this every week. Oregon plays in the Pac-12, and I am the Pac-12 homer. Love UCLA, massive UCLA fan. But the Pac-12 is so bad this season, right? Look at this. Strength of schedule, 112. That's comparable to a lot of the small schools we're looking at. Strength production, a little better, 86, but not great, right? Victory per game, good. That Ohio State victory really goes a long way. Being UCLA, I think, helped them too. Fresno State even, is helping them out. The more Fresno State wins, even though they lost. I have to pull up this part. And again, I said this last week, and I'll say it again this week. Regardless if you agree or disagree with me on any of those things I mentioned, the one thing that I think is indisputable is that out of all the teams that have one loss, Oregon has the worst loss against a 3-6 Stanford. I don't think there's any team with one loss currently in college football that has a worse loss than Oregon. And as I'm going into this, I gotta ban this guy because he is promoting some kind of garbage. Block. Man, I got excited for like maybe somebody finally came to say hi, but no, just another spam. Just as well. So that is my thoughts on Oregon. Severely, severely overrated. Again, I'll read this last thought from last week, and that is that I thought at best Oregon stays ranked the same. They're ranked number 7. I figured they would stay the same. I think at worst they would drop. Really shocks me that they moved up. I'm sorry, they are not deserving. And again, Pac-12, I would love it. I would love Oregon made the playoffs and Pac-12 homer, but no siree. Don't think they should be there. And again, they moved up only one spot because playing a really weak Washington school. Moving on, Wake Forest. Wake Forest, you're like thinking, oh, that's pretty accurate. You know, they're number 9, then they're number 11. No, Wake Forest, I actually had, I believe, as high as number 2 in the rankings. And I saw someone say this in one of the comments on a video for one of the TikTok videos I was watching. This guy covering this, right? They said if Wake Forest had the Clemson logo on their helmet, they'd be a top 2 or 3 school. I 100% agree with that statement. Strength schedule, not good. It's the ACC, I get. Strength production, solid. But, yeah, again, wins have value. Their wins are, if we compare that to 4.68 per game, right? Compare that to Oregon, 4.69. We're saying that the quality of wins between Oregon and Wake Forest are identical. Like, we're talking about a fraction separate, right? And if you look at both their conferences, both very weak conferences, right? Why would you consider, if you consider Oregon a top 4, now probably a top 3 school, why would Wake Forest be no different last week when they were undefeated? And if you look at even the loss, Wake Forest is probably going to drop, maybe even lower. The loss to North Carolina is nowhere near as bad as the loss Oregon had to Stanford. So there is no logic to show why Wake Forest would be even ranked below Oregon when they played a tougher strength of schedule. They have a tougher strength of production. The offenses and defenses, their face is way tougher than Oregon's facing. They both play in weak conference. I get that. But I think that the quality of the wins, I think that you're only hanging your hat on. I think the only thing that you can really differentiate that, the only one thing that Oregon has is you have one quality win that's better than the best Wake Forest has. The best win that Wake Forest has is against Virginia, right? Where the best win that Oregon has against Ohio State. And I think that's the only thing this committee is hanging their hat on. And I think as a whole, the schedule and everything for Wake Forest is tougher as a whole, complete, and the loss is not as bad than Oregon's. So those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think. Oklahoma State. Oh, I was rooting for you guys so bad because you were the Oklahoma I prefer to be ranked high. But, yeah, you had that loss against Iowa State. No buenos. But Oklahoma State, they're ranked number 11 in the playoff committee poll last week. They'll move up with all the craziness that happened. Maybe only one spot. It's a tight at the top. So maybe I would not be surprised if my rankings and theirs start matching up from here on out. But, yeah, Oklahoma State ranked number 10 here. Again, Big 12 conference, solid conference. They're number 83 strength schedule, 53 strength production. Another good win. Not great. Kansas really hurt them, I think, beating that team because they're so weak. But West Virginia, okay, not a good team, but not the worst you could play. Is there? Here's an interesting question. Is there enough for Oklahoma State to make a playoff push, being number 10? Things have to line up a certain way. No, I'm doubtful. No, I can't. I was going to try to sell you guys on that. I can't. I don't see it here in front of me. All right. Well, maybe next year, Cowboys. Number 9, Michigan State. Michigan State, I did have as number 3 in the nation here in my formula. Um, Tough loss, man, against Purdue. But Purdue, again, does not surprise me. Um, Michigan State, 87% schedule, 35 straight production. Really tough offense defense they're facing, right? Not a bad loss against Purdue, so they still a top 10 team. Um, they'll drop. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. They'll probably be close to where I have them, to be honest. Maybe they'll be a little bit higher, which I think they should be. But I think number 9 rank would be fair for them. But yeah, technically not out of it. I mean, they could sneak in number 4 spot. Definitely should be ahead of Oregon. So we'll see. We'll see if the playoff committee wises up. I mean, there's definitely, you got 2 games left. No, 3 games left. And you could still make your conference champ. Yeah, Michigan State, maybe not out of it. Big 10 is definitely strong enough. They definitely have enough games. Yeah, I could see it. Ohio State, number 8. Ohio State is number 5 in the playoff committee polls. We'll now move on to the playoff spot, right? Probably number 4 spot, taking Michigan State. They had Nebraska really struggling this season, but I hate when I do that. Everything else is good for Ohio State. Strength schedule, really good. Their only hang-up is that loss against Oregon. It's still a really good school. I'm not saying they're not, but should not be a top 4 or 3 school. Strength production, really good, right? Number 38. They'll be in the playoff conversation in the committee polls. Are they deserving? Especially when one school coming up, and that one's going to be a hard one to explain. But yeah, I think everything, even if they lose, I think Ohio State is still in great shape. Well, no, they would have 2 losses. I don't know. I'd be really curious if they were to lose 1 game, how the playoff committee polls would treat them. The VPI polls, they would survive, depending on who they lose on. But I don't know. I'd really be curious. And we'll see. Alabamers. I have to say this every week with Alabama. Strength schedule, middle of the road, solid. Strength production, amazing. Top 15. I say this every week with Alabama. Yes, they play in the SEC. The SEC is the best conference as of now. Right? We'll see what happens once the bowl game's going to come around, right? But what about this resume puts them as a top 2 or 3 school? We'll jump into the schools, so I want to keep it in mind. I'll leave you with that question, and we'll do a little compare and contrast when we get to the top 4 schools, and we'll start comparing those. And you tell me if Alabama deserves to be a top 4 school, let alone number 2 school. So I get their Alabama, I get the recruiting class, I get the history, I get the coaching, I get all of that. But as far as what they've accomplished, we'll jump into it in a minute. You tell me if they deserve to be a top 4 school. Number 7 on here. I'm seeing they're about 5 spots higher. They're 5 spots higher than they should be, but we'll jump into that. UTSA. You're going to say, how the heck on God's green earth could you ever have University of Texas and San Antonio, let alone top 25, which they're not in the conference or playoff committee polls. Number, what are they in the, let me look it up real quick. In the AP polls, they are number 15, respected, but not in the playoff committee, nor they will they, I think, ever be. And you'll say, okay, what's the justification, right? Well, here's the thing. They have 9 wins. They are a hair higher than Alabama, but again, they don't have any losses. I get it. It's weak strength schedule, 127. Weak strength production. If all things were the same, if Alabama or any of the schools I mentioned with 1 loss had the same, if they were all 9-0, it wouldn't even be close to UTSA. It wouldn't even be in the conversation. Again, wins have value. And what we're saying is the quality of wins will give it a score of 4.16 Right to Alabama, 5.1. The quality of wins, we're saying that a win from UTSA is worth 4/5 the win of an Alabama win, right? They don't have to work as hard. Same thing if we look at Ohio State. Ohio State, 5. Alabama, 5.10. Michigan State, 4.8. Still almost a 5, right? Ohio State. From a lot of these schools, we're saying, again, UTSA, the quality of their wins is worth about 4/5 that of a bigger school. So you combine that 4/5, and you combine that they're 9-0, and they're not being punished for any losses. Again, they're skating on thin ice. If they were to lose one game, they'd fall off the map, right? They play in Conference USA, a super weak conference, right? One of the weakest. But because they're winning, they're undefeated. Will they be in the playoff conference? No, not even close. I think even if they would go, 13-0, a lot of things had to happen. But because they're winning, and their wins are 4/5 that of a bigger school, they're climbing the ladder slowly. Do they deserve to be a top 10 team? Yes. Are they in the playoff conversation? No. The numbers just aren't there. But yeah, kind of a shocker. Yeah, something to think about. Especially next to Alabama. That was a fun one. It was a hard thing to explain with my formula. If you ask me, would UTSA be able to, Michigan to Oklahoma? No, and here's why. Yeah, what we're trying to measure here is how deserving they are of their resume. This isn't a predictive model of who would win, but just looking at that, yeah, I get the 23 and 31 offensive defense, right, respectively, with this weak strength production. So obviously, these numbers here are being boosted by this number here, right? The lower this number is, the higher these are. There's a correlation. You're playing against really weak offensive defenses, which really boost your own offensive defense. Compared to Alabama, who is playing, middle of the road strength schedule, but top 15. They're playing some of the toughest offenses and defenses, having their own top 14, number 11 offensive defense. So, yeah, it would be a massacre. There's no way UTSA could match up, but we're not comparing teams as far as how they match up. We're comparing them as far as what they've accomplished on their resume, and looking at it that way, yes, UTSA is slightly more accomplished because they're 9-0, even though their wins, we're saying, were 4/5 of what Alabama is, right? So, always fun when to justify that. Moving on to number 5, a team who was ranked number 1 for a little while in the VPI polls, but really dropped. Michigan State loss hurt them. A lot to like here of Michigan, right? 32 strength schedule, 37 strength production. Not a good win over Indiana. Really doesn't matter. Michigan definitely not out of it in the playoff conversation. I mean, they're ranked number 7 in the playoff polls. They'll definitely move up 1, maybe even 2 spots. So the Big 10 is definitely locked in to get somebody in there, right? So it's the same thing with the SEC, because it's the SEC, even though they may not deserve it. I mean, you take away, if Georgia lost, there'd be a scenario where even they have no SEC school, but because the SEC is who they are, when it comes to the playoff committee, they will. But if it comes to this formula here, there would be a scenario that they wouldn't if this was the deciding factor. But of course, this is just something I made up, so there's no way to enforce it. But definitely 2 conferences to have locked in teams. Not much more to say in Michigan. Just doing great, and still have Ohio State left in the schedule. So yeah, definitely in the playoff conversation. Really curious who comes in. All right. Now, last week I was saying how I agreed 100% that the playoff. That's probably one of the only things I really agree with. And the most controversial thing is that. Can I get rid of this message, by the way? Nope. All right. The only thing I agreed with was that Cincinnati deserved to drop out of the number 2 spot, right? Dropped to number 6. I have them up to number 4 now. They'll probably move to number 5 in the playoff committee. They might drop. Maybe Michigan will leave them. I don't know. But Now they deserve to be in the playoffs. And again, let's start comparing. Let's make two comparisons here, right? So right now you're thinking you're so crazy for thinking UTSA should be a top 10 team, let alone number 6, right? Well, look at this. Let's compare Cincinnati to UTSA. UTSA 127, 124 respectively in strength of schedule, strength of production, right? Cincinnati 119, 107, right? So yeah, it's better, but you're still in the hundreds. It's absolute garbage, right? Look at the quality. 4.16 versus Cincinnati's 4.36. So, even though I get this American Athletic Conference is a better conference than Conference USA, right? That's where they play in. Yeah, Conference USA. Just want to make sure. Am I crazy for saying that UTSA deserves to be a top 10 team, let alone number 6? If you're agreeing and you're getting upset that Cincinnati's kicked out of the top 4, but their resume is super similar. The only difference is, again, same example I feel like with Oregon over like Wake Forest, is Oregon has that one win that you're holding your hat on to. Cincinnati has that one win, and that's it, If you look at like UTSA, their biggest win is UTEP, right? That's probably their biggest win right now. Yeah, but both of them play garbage schedules. So I think the whole idea of looking at just one win it's important, but also you can't hang your hat. You can't play like I mentioned the SEC where you played only 8 conference games. You can't book a bunch of weaklings and just hang your hat on that one win and carry you. Like, it should matter, but it shouldn't be the thing that carries you all season. So, yeah, really similar resumes. I don't understand the logic of not having UTSA. Here's the thing. I could understand why you wouldn't even have them in the top 10. It's fair. If you want to calculate this is how I calculate it with my formula. If you want to calculate a different way or or not even calculate, just have your own opinion of why this shouldn't be even a top 10 team. I get that, but there's no way you could look me straight in the eyes and justify UTSA not being a top 25 team at all. So, yeah, really, if you have any argument, I would just throw them in the comments. I would love, love, love to see that argument, because that's what I'm saying here. If you, it makes no sense that you would have so much high regard for Cincinnati and completely dismiss UTSA altogether. Makes no sense. Okay. Last part I was going to mention here. Comparing, we're saying why Alabama doesn't deserve to be a top 4 school, let alone number 2. Comparing them to Cincinnati, again, we are saying that even though you play in the SEC best conference, I get that. We're still saying that Cincinnati is about 4/5 your win. A little better than UTSA. But Cincinnati has one more win than you. Even though strength of schedule, strength of production, way, way higher for you, right? What's hurting you, you can make an argument that Alabama should be higher than Cincinnati. I could see that. But I have calculated here, not the case. But I could see that. But let's move on to Oklahoma. Here's, you know what? Let's go back. I can't get over this UTSA thing, right? UTSA. Remember, I gotta go. I'm sorry, guys. I know I want to go into Alabama, but I just saw this for Oklahoma. UTSA 127th strength schedule, 124th strength production. Oklahoma 121 strength production, a lot higher, but look at the strength schedule, absolute garbage strength of schedule. Their victory production index per game is only slightly higher than Cincinnati and UTSA. Their biggest win, you say you say Cincinnati has Notre Dame, which Notre Dame, we'll get into Notre Dame, definitely is a massive, massive win. I'm not going to knock that at all, but there's no way that you could hang your hat on Kansas State as being your biggest win, right? So if you have the logic that Oklahoma is a top 10 team, but not UTSA, what, whew, what are you thinking there? What are you thinking at playoff committee by not having UTSA nowhere in the top 25, where they have every reason to be a top 10 team? I could argue any way about it. Okay, I'm just so fascinated by that. Okay, Oklahoma versus Alabama. Again, it's just the only difference is you can make an argument for Alabama, but again, it's that one loss that's hurting them. It's not a bad loss. Texas A&M is not a bad loss at all, but that's why we have Oklahoma so much lower. And again, if we look, we're talking about just like a 2-point difference between Oklahoma and Cincinnati. It's tight. It's really a tight race. And that's why we have Oklahoma on the outside. Even though, yeah, I totally see the argument, but they don't deserve to be number 2. And here's why. Here's another team with the one loss, right? Notre Dame. Notre Dame, being the gold standard with those gold helmets now. Number 19 strength schedule, number 7 strength production, right? Versus Alabama, 72. Strength production really good, but strength schedule way lower than Notre Dame. Look at the schedule. Not a Division II school or FCS school in sight, right? Your only loss is to an undefeated Cincinnati school, right? I understand you don't have that one signature win. A lot of good wins. We just talked about how Wisconsin, really underrated. That was a really good win. Talk about Purdue, really underrated. They're on their way. North Carolina, on their way. North Carolina just had that huge win over Wake Forest, who was undefeated, right? So they're putting together, a great resume. And I don't understand why you would have Notre Dame all the way to number 10, which will rise up. But compared them to Alabama, their schedule is there is no, they're not even close. But you have Alabama at number 2, and you're not even, or Notre Dame isn't even sniffing the playoffs at this point. Yeah, no, that I can't get behind that. That's ridiculous. Notre Dame absolutely should be a playoff team. It should. If you had to choose one or the other, Notre Dame. It's not even close how much far ahead they are than Alabama with their schedule. So that's what I wanted to get into, and that's why I think Alabama is way overrated. We're saying Alabama is on their way. They're ranked number 7. We're just saying they did not deserve to be number 2. I could see an argument over Cincinnati and Oklahoma if you were calculating this different. And this is how I calculate it, right, with no opinion of whatsoever. I could see an argument for it, but I cannot see it against Notre Dame. And last but not least, the easiest of easy picks here with Georgia. Again, I said this last week, and I'll say it this week again. It's not even, I hate the SEC with a passion. But the foundation of me even creating this database was to prove that the SEC was overrated. But it is not even close of how dominant Georgia has been. It's not even close between Notre Dame, who I just vouched for how great they are, how far ahead they are between them and everybody else. They are twice as good of any team that's going for number 17 on. Again, just like Notre Dame, not that one signature win, a lot of good 6-3 teams, but the strength schedule is stellar, number 23. Strength production, stellar, number 19. Their defense, number 2 in the nation, playing against this schedule. Number 44 offense, which is really good. It's a no-brainer. Georgia, that's the only. If you're gonna get one right, it's definitely that one. I disagree with the majority of this, but that's the only one that you hit the nail on the head because it's such an easy pick. But that's it. That's it for our little review of the rankings. We'll see how close I am. We'll cover it next week. Let me know what you think in the comments. I think this is probably the best analysis I've done so far with doing these rankings. Especially that UTSA, man. Give UTSA some love. You let me know. Did this UTSA deserve to have some love? Yeah, really curious about that. But that's it for the Game Ticket Show. If you guys enjoyed the stream, please consider giving me a follow. If you are on YouTube, head over to my Twitch channel. Give me a follow there. We are on our path to 50 followers. Will I become affiliate after that? Probably not. I think I'm having fun just being free range, doing whatever I want, growing out this dirty stash. I do appreciate everybody who's taking the time to watch these videos. I definitely have a lot of fun making them. So if you enjoy more content like this, give me a follow. Thank you all for watching. I will see you next time. And you all just have yourself a wonderful day or night whenever you're watching this. For me, it's night. So good night, everybody.